Care to chat? Hello and welcome to our podcast from the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. Social care and social work really came to the fore during the pandemic, and now with the crisis in the health service, they're in the news again. So what are these jobs? Who are the people who work in them? What are the routes into social care and social work? How can staff progress and develop their careers? What reforms are necessary? And how do people in these fields take care of themselves as well as their clients? Those are all topics that we'll be covering in this series. And today we're finding out about the Social Care Council itself and what it does. Patricia, Marian and Declan are with me, and I'm going to get them each to give a kind of speed dating introduction, who you are and what you do. So Patricia, would you like to start?
Hi Wendy. Yes, my name is Patricia Higgins and I'm the Chief Executive of the Social Care Council, and I suppose my job is to lead the Council and to make sure that the Council achieves the objectives that are set out for it, and also to set the strategic direction for the Council as a workforce regulator.
Marian, what about you?
Hi Wendy, I'm Marian O'Rourke and I am the Director of Regulation and Standards, which is a bit of a mouthful, but basically that means I'm part of the senior leadership team along with Patricia and Declan, and my responsibility is to lead the work around social work education and training, all of the professional development of both social work and social care, and I have responsibility then for the fitness to practice function, which is part of our processes in helping to make sure and assure the public that we have social workers and social care workers who are safe and fit to practice in the community.
And Declan?
Good morning, Wendy. My name's Declan McAllister. I'm Director of Registration and Corporate Services and work closely with Patricia and Marian around delivery of the strategic objectives for the Social Care Council. Now, what do I do? I'm in terms of that corporate services tag, so I look after the money, I look after human resources, look after technology, all of that type of corporate servicey type of activities. But most importantly, I'm responsible for registering over 44,000 social workers and social care workers across Northern Ireland today.
That's the first time I've ever understood what corporate services actually are. So now that we've got that all clear, thanks very much indeed, all of you. Tell us a bit. I mean, I'm interested to know how you got to where you are today. And since we started with you, Patricia, tell us a bit about your journey to heading up the council and your current role.
Okay, so I'm a social worker and I've been a social worker for a number of years, and I started my career working in the voluntary sector and working in the field of criminal justice. And through that work, I also became very interested in learning and development and social work education and social care education. So the voluntary sector organisation that I worked for, I in the end ended up being a training manager and eventually became a senior manager in that organisation, but had a real interest in learning and development and student supporting students and social work students as well. So that led me then to work for the predecessor organisation to the council, which was the Central Council for Education and Training and Social Work. So that's where I moved into more of a regulation role, working in social work education and regulating the social work degree as it was delivered through the universities, and also becoming quite involved in vocational qualifications for social care. So I suppose in a sense that was my natural journey through then into the Social Care Council, and government decided to set up a regulatory body in the different parts of the UK for social work and social care. So the Central Council for Education and Training and Social Work was abolished and the councils came into being, and it was at the time of devolution, so we all had our own organisation. So I suppose working within the field of criminal justice and then working in social work regulation sort of naturally led me into the work of the council and the regulation role that the council has. And I worked as an advisor in the council and then moved to the director role, which Marian now has, for a number of years, and then ended up as chief executive. So that was my journey.
Do you miss the social work bit?
Well, sometimes I do, yes, working directly in practice with people who require your help and support. But I think one of the things that I have become really clear of, and particularly in my role as Chief Executive, is that the skills that I have in social work and the knowledge from social work lends itself really to this role as Chief Executive. Social work is a relationship-based profession, working with people. And as the Social Care Council, I think we do an awful lot in terms of building relationships, connecting with our stakeholders, connecting with registrants. So I feel that I am carrying my social work skills and knowledge with me every day as I do this job.
That's very interesting. And Marian, you're nodding away there. And actually, we've heard in another podcast about how the view that the skills that social workers have should be spread much more widely and used in other areas because of their unique qualities, if you like. But what was your journey to your current role?
So, yeah, I started off as, when I got my social work qualification, I joined the probation service, Probation Board Northern Ireland, and was a probation officer for a number of years in terms of frontline practice. And I suppose that's one of the good things about social work, Wendy, in that it can take you to lots of different places, and probation was certainly a really great place to hone your social work skills and see where that would take you. And one of the things about probation at that stage was that they were very keen. You came into the organisation with core social work knowledge and skills, obviously, but you had to develop your understanding of what that looked like and meant within a justice context, and working with people who were coming before the courts or going in and out of prison and working in the community. And so ongoing learning and development was a central part of your practice and a central part of what probation as an organisation would expect you to be able to do in order to work in particular ways, and making sure that we were working in a way, I suppose, that ensured that that the society could trust and respect what we were trying to do within that context. And probation were very keen in terms of learning and development that we retained our social work identity. And so I was part of a group of people within Northern Ireland that linked to the organisation that Patricia talked about, the Central Council for Social Work Education and Training, who were starting to look at, okay, so that's what happens to bring you to the point of being a qualified social worker, but what happens afterwards? How does that training and development make you a better social worker or a better probation officer? And so I got involved in that whole world of what would that actually look like, and got the opportunity to be part of the development of that in Northern Ireland, which was a really exciting time and opened doors, I think, for me into seeing that social work was, yes, first and foremost about working with people on in the community or on the front line, but also that there needed to be a whole support system that sat behind that to make sure that what was happening was consistent and good. And so it was through that door that I got involved in looking at social work education and training at a more advanced level or after you qualified. And I was seconded out of probation into a partnership body that was leading that work in Northern Ireland, and from that led me into working with the council, where I've been for the past over 20 years now. So that's how I've
So you've been
landed
there
here.
virtually from the beginning?
Yeah, well, not from the beginning of the council, but yes, from very early on. And in coming in, came in through that education and training door, but then saw great opportunities and like Patricia, moved up through the organisation to now my director role, where I have a much wider remit in terms of supporting social work and social care in all contexts.
Very interesting, I must say. Declan, what about you? Tell us a bit about your journey.
Well, Wendy, I'm from a family of nurses. My mother was a nurse, and I suppose I had the values of care ingrained at a very young age. My first job when I was about 17 or 18 was as a care assistant in a private nursing home, where I really had that introduction to what being a social care worker was. Now, that was a good 20, 30 years ago. From there, I then went to work after university in a larger caring organisation in the Isle of Man. And there again, just honing skills as a social care worker. And then took a bit of a different direction. Went into advertising and marketing for a few years, but came back and actually took up a role as a registered person in charge of a nursing home, which then was bought over by a larger organisation. But then I got a great opportunity to come and set up a new social work-led organisation in Northern Ireland called The Guardian ad litem agency. And along with a fantastic chief executive that I worked with quite some years ago, we set up the agency, which was the first like it in Northern Ireland, representing children and young people within the family court service. But what it introduced me to was the profession of social work. I think it was a completely social work run service, and I really got I suppose an awareness and an engagement of what the social work profession was. Who were these individuals out there doing so many wonderful things for many vulnerable children and families in Northern Ireland? We set the organisation up in 1996. I spent 20 wonderful years there. Thought I would never leave, but I think I got the opportunity then to come and work at the Social Care Council in 2017. And it was an opportunity almost to come full circle a little. Having started my life as in social care, having worked with social workers for so long, and then to come and be part of the registration and regulation function for social workers and social care workers in Northern Ireland was almost like I'm really moving up into the bigger area of really looking at the entire workforce of social work and social care and having that opportunity to really affect change. We all work at levels of government and with minister trying to affect change across social work and social care. And of course, one of the important things for me is social work is a very professional a function. It's got real representation across the United Kingdom. We have organisations like BASWA, which is that official representation of social work. Social care does not. We have been in that and filling that gap for some years now in terms of trying to raise the profile of the social care workforce here in Northern Ireland. It is the largest health and social care workforce across Northern Ireland, and it's ready for change. And we are really looking forward to be a part of that.
Well, I must say, it's fascinating to have heard from the three of you about your journeys, about the roles that you play. And I think it's always very interesting whenever you're involved with an organisation or when you're a registered part of that organisation to know who the people are who are in charge. And I hope that we've been able to give more than just a snapshot of who you are and frankly what you're like. We've kind of got there. I think all of us have mentioned at one stage or another the fact that the Social Care Council has been around now for just over 21 years. How did it come about, and why, Patricia, is it? You mentioned that each of the devolved nations kind of set up their own thing, if you like, wouldn't you know? And ours isn't the same as the rest, again, wouldn't you know? So tell us a bit about why it's different to other regulators and maybe if you could explain a bit about the model.
Okay. So, yes, the councils across the UK came into being on the 1st of October 21 years ago. And that really, I think, was as a consequence of devolution. So the predecessor body SETSWA, while it was a UK organisation, had devolved nations. So it had offices in each of the nations. And at the time that government was looking to then bring in workforce regulation, that model was already in existence, and devolution Declan was around as well. So that's, I think, what led to us, each country having its own regulator, which is unlike healthcare workforce regulators, where there's generally a UK regulator that covers all of the workforce across the UK. So I think that was one of the unique things. We are quite unique in each country having its own social work, social care regulator. I think the other uniqueness around, and Declan's talked a lot about social care, there had been a strong lobby for social work professional regulation. It was not on a par with doctors or nurses at that stage. And so that was one of the reasons why government were bringing it in. But uniquely, they also felt that there was a huge workforce, a social care workforce, which worked in tandem with social work. So it's part of a larger social care family. And government felt that it would be important to look to begin to register social care as well, and to look at that more incrementally. So social work was the first profession within the family that was regulated across the UK. So social care, also a lot of other healthcare workforce professional regulators wouldn't necessarily have assistant type roles registered. They would mainly regulate the profession. But along with that also came a focus on building and supporting the workforce. So while workforce regulation is primarily about protecting the public, and that's why we put people on a register, and if there are complaints or issues, we will investigate, and it may well mean that we need to remove people from the register if they're not safe to practice. But a really important part of protecting the public is making sure that people have the right competence and skills and knowledge to be able to do the job they're being asked to do. And so our model focuses very strongly on what we call workforce development, on supporting social work. And Marian's talked a bit about the post-qualifying social work framework that we have, which is where we ensure that social workers have a range of qualifications and learning and development to support them. And we're also doing exactly the same thing with social care. So we're building a big resource of learning opportunities for them, digital learning opportunities, and also making sure that the right qualifications are in place. So the emphasis for us is about how do we ensure that all of our registrants have the right knowledge and skills, the right tools to equip them to do the best job they can and provide safe care to those who require it.
And it's excuse me. It's quite a wide range of responsibility, I suppose, that the Social Care Council has. And when I looked at the objectives that were set out for the Social Care Council back in 2001 to strengthen and support the professionalism of the workforce, to raise standards of practice and to protect the people who use the services. You mentioned, Declan, you've got, I think, 43,000 registered social workers and social care workers. What do they get for their registration fee?
Yeah, it's a question that's often asked, Wendy, even by our registrants. One of the things that I can say wholeheartedly is they are part of a collective. They are part of, particularly social work and social care workers, they can be proud to be part of a regulated workforce. Secondly, I think as a social worker and a social care worker, you're there to provide care to the most vulnerable in our society. Those who are vulnerable can have confidence that they are being cared for and looked after by a regulated and a registered individual. So standards of care will be they can expect standards of care to be really, really high. In terms of the workforce and what they get, and it is a particularly small fee considering all other regulators across the UK, but they have opportunity for continuous professional development. Particularly as a social worker, when you qualify as a social worker, you then have access to our professional and practice framework. Further higher level qualifications that social workers can apply and make part of their professional career. For social care workers, we have an unlimited array of digital learning available completely free of charge, but learning that has been identified and developed in response to particular issues that are going on within Northern Ireland today. So, for example, in relation to COVID, we were within a matter of weeks, we had immediate learning resources for dealing with infection and prevention control. Today, we have immediate learning resources available to support social workers and social care workers, particularly in dealing with things like loneliness, for example, which is it really has been a higher percentage of that type of issue that has come out from COVID. I think as well as being a part of that regulated and registered collective group, you can be proud. You can be proud you are a recognised social worker, you are a recognised social care worker. And I think particularly for social care, I think it's so important that they see themselves as a collective. They see themselves as, for the first time, I think particularly coming out of COVID, the public now see what their role is within society. And it's like everything else. When you're a collective, you're stronger together. And in many respects, we know the issues going on around social care. And I think as a collective registered workforce with the Social Care Council supporting, as would all of our employers and government as well, we are ready for change within social care. Within social work, I think we constantly engage with social work to, in many respects, support the profession in recognising the importance of being a registered and regulated profession. I'm not a social worker as Patricia and Marian are, but we often have really great debates and discussions around the journey for social work, the importance of regulation. Coming from a family of nurses, I always remember my sister and brother, so important around the whole aspect of my regulation, my standards come first, and then I've also got my job that I have to do for my employer. I think there's been that transition for social work happening as well. We're quite a young regulated profession in social work compared to whether it's a doctor or whether it's nursing. So you get really great value for your money in terms of the registration fee. When
he sells it well, Marian, I must say. I'm interested to pick up on that point that Declan's made a couple of times, and pick up with you, Marian, about ready for change, particularly perhaps in social care. Because if I've got this correctly, social work was more regulated than social care was. And so social care workers have kind of come into that regulatory framework from a much more... from what was sometimes quite a kind of casual arrangements or personal arrangements, that kind of thing. Has it made social care workers themselves feel more professional, and how do you feel that it's working for them, given the whole business that people are now more aware of what they do, and that it is something to be really admired, and that they do have truly professional skills?
Yeah, so Declan has very well described, what that world of being a regulated person looks like. And for social work, and I was one of those social workers when Patricia was the same, when we qualified, you weren't required to register. And to me, that was a bit of a shock. I came out of university and thought, is no one going to be looking at my practice to make sure that I'm safe in terms of out there working with families? So I very much welcomed that opportunity of being recognised as a profession then, and I could see great value in that professional identity that comes with being registered, and for social work, the protection of title, you can't call yourself a social worker unless you are properly trained and qualified and registered. For social care, as you say, Wendy, that has been a different journey in that social care is I suppose, not recognised as a profession in the same way as doctors or nurses or social workers are. There isn't a recognised qualification. There isn't a recognised journey or pathway into that as a career. And that's, as Declan had said earlier, that's where regulation has given us the opportunity as the council to help lead what that journey should look like. The first part of that was bringing everybody onto the register, and out of the over 44,000 people that we have on the register, the vast majority of those people are social care workers. We have about 6,500 social workers in Northern Ireland, in and around over 700 to 800 social work students, and then the rest are social care workers. So over 34,000 social care workers. That's a vast number of people, and all coming from different backgrounds, working in a whole variety of contexts, some with qualifications, some without qualifications, and maybe not recognising themselves as part of, as Declan described, a collective part of a workforce, would have maybe traditionally seen themselves just as working within their own particular area of work. So whether that is a home care worker or a day care worker or a residential care worker. So lots of different titles that float around without giving people an understanding of what that looks like, both in terms of the standard of care that those people can deliver, but also the opportunity to stay in that role and see themselves as being a social care worker. So regulation has provided an opportunity to do that, and having brought everybody onto the register and helped them, our first challenge was helping social care workers to understand what standards meant. What does that look like in different situations? So providing, personal care in a home setting or in a care home setting. What does that look like? How can I make sure that I have the right values as well as the knowledge and skills? How can I make sure that the person that I'm caring for feels that they are being treated respectfully and with dignity and with really good care? And so that's what I think that the opportunity for change looks like. It means that as a whole workforce, and as we've said, the biggest workforce within the health and social care system in Northern Ireland, we are bringing together all of those different parts of the system, helping people to see that there is a career here, that it is complex, it is challenging, it requires knowledge and skills in the same way as all of the other professions within health and social care require that level of knowledge, of skill, and to bring people to that common standard. And that's a big piece of work. So that is a journey, and we recognise that there will be young people coming into social care who don't know whether they'll stay with it, maybe see it as a stepping stone to something else. But really what we want to do for the people who use social care services, who open their door to a social care worker, they want to see, they want to build relationships. They want to see that the person coming into their home or into their day centre or wherever that might be, is someone who builds a relationship with them. So you need people to stay with the job and grow with it and see opportunities to stay, to develop. And I think that's the pathway for change that we're looking for, that people will see this as a valuable and recognised career.
I suppose one of the elements that the Social Care Council is responsible for as well, Patricia, is sharing all of that. Declan mentioned that we were all a bit more knowledgeable about social care workers since the pandemic, and I suppose, if I'm being honest as well, the older you get, the more you're aware of what they do. But that's part, through family experience, all of that kind of thing, and then you really are, the whole focus on standards of conduct and practice, that becomes really important, because that's what you want for your nearest and dearest, those values being applied. But the story didn't get out there for a long time, did it? And it is part of what you're doing now to share what all of this is about. Tell me a bit about how you go about that.
So I suppose particularly in terms of social care, the story didn't really get out. And as Declan said, I think, through the pandemic, we all began to see the importance of the role that social care can play in supporting people to live safely, particularly in their own homes, but also live safely wherever their home is, even if that's in a care home. So social care started to sort of rise to the top, but we have probably discussed in other podcasts the issues and difficulties facing that particular workforce. So for us, one of the really important things about a regulator when you've got something like 43,000 registrants is you can really build your intelligence. If you stay connected to your registrants, you can learn about their experience and what's happening out on the ground. And so I think it's really important then when you have that intelligence that you do exactly what you said and you share that. And you share that to influence. So we do a lot of sharing up to government so that government are clear, government policymakers understand what social care looks like. And we are trying to reform social care, as you know, so that information, gathering that from our registrants, but also gathering it from service users and their carers, helps to inform future policy development. So we see ourselves very clearly operating in that sort of influencing space, if you like. And we work very closely in partnership with our stakeholders as well, with employers, and understand what the issues are for them. But I think the other thing, particularly in relation to social care and also in relation to social work, is that jobs are not really fully understood by the public. So a lot of work that we do is to try to help people understand, what does a social worker do? What does a social care worker do? And we tell that through stories, and we have a lot of stories that we put onto our website that explains what a social worker or social care worker does. So that's part of helping people understand the important and valuable roles that both of those workforces carry out, but also to promote it as a career. So we want people to join both social work and social care as we go forward, and we want to describe what the jobs are, what they entail, so that people understand what a good career in social work or social care would look like.
I'm keen to touch on just a few other things. I know we've been chatting for quite a while here, and when I asked at the beginning if you care to chat, we certainly have. But I'd like to talk a bit about that third objective, just briefly, which is set out, those objectives set out at the start, to protect the people who use the services, public protection. And it's a lot more than it's not a lot more than fitness to practice. So if someone's got a concern about a social worker or social care worker's practice, do they contact you? If I maybe put that to you, Patricia, and then we'll come to Marian in a moment.
Yes, so if someone has a concern about the practice of a social worker or social care worker, yes, they can contact us and raise that issue with us. And what we will do is we will investigate that. And the standards that Marian talked about earlier, we use those as the benchmark. So the standards are the benchmark of good practice, and if the concern comes through, we will look to see if someone has continued to work within their standards or if they have breached their standards, which would then lead us to be quite concerned about their practice.
Right. And what about that fitness to practice? I mean, that's not just a phrase. It's a very important element of all of this, isn't it, Marian?
It is indeed, Wendy. And all regulators will have a process that sits around their fitness to practice function. In essence, what it means is, as Patricia said, it's to provide that assurance to people who use services and to the general public that social worker or that social care worker is properly trained, properly qualified, is who they say they are, and is going to work to a particular level of standards. And very often when there are concerns around what that's looking like or what that experience is, the first port of call will be with the provider of that service, so the employer very often. There's very, very little independent social work or indeed social care happening in Northern Ireland. The vast majority is through either the health and social care system or a provider of that service. And so that's people's first port of call, obviously, to talk to whoever is providing that service, to say, I have concerns here for a whole variety of reasons. And employers are very keen then that they will have a process around that to look for early resolution of the problem. Where the concerns are of a level that it does then call into question whether or not that person is actually fit to be a social worker or be a social care worker, then we will become involved, and that referral can come to us from the employer, from the person themselves who's using the service, from their family members, from anybody, as Patricia says, and indeed from the social worker or social care worker themselves, because they will know that something has happened in the context of their work that needs to be reported to us. And we will deal with each of those referrals on an individual basis. So whilst we have a really robust process built around that and guidance around what that experience will look like, we will look at each referral on an individual basis and take into account all of the context around that. And sometimes that can be we can look for early resolution where there may be something that's happening that, with the agreement of the social worker or the social care worker, we are able to work out what is the appropriate response. And it might be that there is a warning put on their registration, or that they agree to undertake further training and development, or so there can be particular conditions that are set to that. But there will be, and I have to emphasise, in very small number of cases, less than 1% of that 44,000 register, less than 1% of those people will come before us. So it's the vast majority of social workers and social care workers go out in the morning to do a really good job, and the vast majority of them achieve that. But in those small number of circumstances where that's not the case, we will step in, and we will go through an investigation process. We will gather the evidence, and if it's of a particular serious nature, we will present it to an independent committee that has been appointed, and the arrangements of that sit under Declan's directorate, so that there is a separation between the investigation and the decision making around what should happen, and some of those instances may be that there has been a police investigation, so there may be criminal activity involved, or there may be disciplinary outcomes from the employer that requires the registrant, the social worker or the social care worker, to not work, and our committees can decide then to take people off the register and to come to the decision that they are not fit to practice, or that they may practice, but there will be certain conditions attached to that. And all of that is published on our website. The outcomes of those investigations are all published. So it's a very open and robust process, but as I say, really only applies to a very small number, a relatively small number of social workers and social care workers.
So we've talked about the standards of conduct and practice that the Social Care Council oversees, and the fact that, as you've all said, that you're about supporting the workforce and providing that kind of community. Patricia's talked about the kind of system leadership and learning and development. Marian, data and insights, I mean, those are part of your corporate services remit, Declan, now that I understand that. But actually, you need to have the data, don't you? And it feeds the insights, and then that feeds the other elements that Patricia and Marian have been talking about as well. So tell us a bit about how that works.
Yes, Wendy. Data intelligence, I think since I joined the council in 2017, I was making pleas to the department to invest in particularly better data and intelligence across social work and social care. At the Social Care Council, we have the complete umbrella of the workforce. We know every social worker and social care worker who is registered. And we've built, and the department has supported us in investing in visualisations that tell you exactly what the workforce looks like, the age ranges, the type of work they're involved in. But we have more to do around data intelligence. We need to start, particularly in Northern Ireland, start to connect up those data sets, for example, that are held by certainly our 5 health and social care trusts around what does the need look like across our population here in Northern Ireland. Connecting up all our data from our independent providers in terms of the individual services they deliver from their workforce, and what type of actual needs are they actually looking after as well. So when you can start to connect up the workforce with the actual need going on in Northern Ireland, you suddenly get really great intelligence around, have I got the right people with the right skills in the right place, delivering services? And more importantly, where are the gap? Where's the gap in relation to the services? What type of workforce do I need on those particular, let's say, gaps across Northern Ireland where there's particular vulnerable individuals with particular needs? And actually, if I don't know what's in my workforce in terms of individuals with the right skills, the right training, then how can I possibly deliver that individual's care at that point in time? I am really pleased that through our consultation on our new strategic plan, it was the top number one priority that we were getting from our colleagues within the 5 trusts, within independent providers, saying we need better data and intelligence. Our challenge is how do we get it all connected up where everybody's comfortable with sharing their data, and it's put in a way that not only do we as providers utilise that data, but the public can see that data. The decision makers that sit at government can make the right decisions based on the intelligence that data will deliver. I'm really pleased that through the Social Care Council, I've been asked to chair a work stream to look at particularly social work data and intelligence. And I know very soon we'll also be looking at the whole social care piece. It will not be a 3-month delivery. This will take a couple of years to get all the ducks in a row, if I want to use that frame. But I would say in terms of how we deliver better social work and social care, we need to get the data and intelligence right.
Certainly sounds like it, yeah. And if you don't know where you're going, you don't know how to get there. But I mean, you've had a terrific couple of years. I mean, despite the pandemic, in which I must say, the Social Care Council really did excel itself, I think, in getting so much of your stuff online. You've won gold accreditation from Investors in People for Wellbeing, and that was very much around that. You've won the European Social Services Award as well, and congratulations for those. Where, just in maybe a sentence each, if we could, where do you go now? What's next?
Well, we're a very ambitious organisation, as you know, and yes, we did work very hard. We have a tremendous team in the Social Care Council who go above and beyond every day because collectively we believe in what we do. We believe in regulation, and we believe in supporting social workers and social care workers to be the best that they can be. So I think as we journey on, we want to continue in our system leadership role, which you mentioned, in terms of influencing, making sure we listen carefully to our registrants and to those who use services and their carers, and influence change. We're working very collaboratively with the Department of Health around the reform of adult social care, and also to build ourselves towards a centre of excellence. So the work that we've been talking about in relation to social work post-qualifying training and the learning and development we're developing for social care, we want to continue to build that. We want to continue to be responsive to our registrants' needs, as Declan talked about, so that we can provide the right learning and development opportunities to make sure that we keep pace with change, and that our registrants keep pace with change and are able to deliver high quality and safe care. So we're ambitious for more. We're ambitious to support the reform agenda, particularly in social care, and we're ambitious to make sure that we do become a centre of excellence.
Marian?
I suppose in terms of where we go and what that looks like, as Patricia has just described it, one of the really important elements I think that is will be part of that is that every social worker and social care worker on our register, so every one of those 44,000 amazing people who are out there every day, that they have a strong sense of their professional identity. I think that's really important, and we have a journey to go in relation to that. And that as a result of having that strong professional identity, that the people who use the services, who open their doors to social workers and social care workers can see that, can feel that and can experience it, so that they feel that the people that are coming into their homes or that they are working with are professional in everything that they do, and that's a very positive experience for both of them.
And Declan, what about you?
Wendy, I suppose I'd like to finish on saying that the Social Care Council is a values-driven organisation. You've reflected on our Investors in People Award. I would like to reflect very quickly. Peter May, in his new role as Permanent Secretary, visited ourselves and obviously asked us about the organisation. I said, look, Peter, it's like this. You know, you can go out and ask any one of our colleagues sitting out there in the office what our 4 values were. And Peter being Peter said, OK, well, what are they, Declan? So respect, integrity, partnership and excellence. Thankfully, I remembered them at that point. But I do want to reflect one of them, which is partnership. What we do, we have always done in partnership and collaboration. In terms of how we steer the social work profession, how we steer social care through, and we're not behind the wall here. I mean, we are in a state of real difficulty and challenge out there in terms of trying to deliver services at a time when our workforce are under pressure and the public are demanding more in terms of the quality of care that's delivered. How we will deliver for the people of Northern Ireland in relation to social work and social care is our partnership ethos. We are willing to engage and work with anyone at any level. And I think for the first time, I would say, particularly around the Department of Health, they see us as that critical friend, that organisation that can bring people together. And I suppose I am just really, really hopeful for the future, Wendy, that we can see a real change within social care and how it's delivered for our citizens, and of course strengthening the whole profession of social work.
Well, it's always good to end on a positive note, and we've managed to do that. Thank you all so much. We started off by saying, so you think you know the Social Care Council? Well, I hope you do now. Patricia, Marian and Declan, thank you so much for joining me today. And thanks to all of you for listening. This is the Care to Chat podcast from the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. Please do subscribe and rate us. And don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues.